Life often feels like walking through a dense forest with no clear trail. We plan, we strategize, we try to control every step, but still obstacles appear. Sometimes the way seems blocked, doors seem closed, and the future looks uncertain. Yet, there is a truth that never fails. God opens the path for those who trust him. When we look at Scripture, we see countless examples of God making a way where there seemed to be none. Moses faced the Red Sea, an impassable barrier. The Israelites had no army strong enough to defeat their enemies. Joseph was imprisoned unjustly. David faced giants, but in each case, God intervened, creating a path, opening doors, and turning impossibilities into victories. The first step is faith. Faith is not passive. It's the active choice to move forward, trusting that God is already at work on your behalf. Even when you cannot see the whole road ahead, God's guidance is present. Remember, the path may not always be smooth. Sometimes God clears the way slowly, step by step, teaching patience, persistence, and reliance on him. Obedience matters. God opens paths for those willing to walk in alignment with his word. When we listen to his voice, follow his instructions, and make choices rooted in his principles, the way becomes clear. Sometimes the path he opens requires courage, stepping into the unknown, leaving comfort zones, and embracing his timing. God's path is also a path of provision. He provides wisdom, strength, and resources along the journey. What seems impossible in your own strength becomes possible through his power. He directs connections, opportunities, and divine appointments to help you reach the destination he has prepared. Finally, gratitude fuels faith. As we walk the path God opens, acknowledging his hand in each step strengthens our trust and magnifies his glory. Every step is a testimony that God is faithful, and every obstacle overcome is a reminder that no barrier is too great for his power. No matter the circumstances, no matter the size of the obstacles, God can make a way. He opens paths when doors are shut, turns trials into triumphs, and leads us into the destiny he has prepared. Walk forward boldly, knowing that the God who opens the path will never leave you stranded. Faith is the foundation upon which every path that God opens is built. It is the invisible bridge between where we are and where God wants to take us. Many people think faith is merely wishing for something or hoping that things will work out. But faith is much more profound than that. Faith is a deliberate choice to trust in God's power, wisdom, and timing, even when circumstances seem impossible. It is the assurance that God is already at work, even when our eyes cannot yet see the way. In life, there are seasons where the road appears completely blocked, where obstacles loom large and opportunities seem scarce. These are the moments when faith becomes not just important, but essential. Faith does not remove challenges from our lives automatically, but it provides the strength and clarity to move forward despite them. To exercise faith is to step into the unknown with the conviction that God is guiding each step. Faith requires action. It is not a passive waiting or a silent hope that things will change. Faith is living in alignment with the belief that God's promises are true and that his power is greater than any difficulty we face. Consider the story of Abraham, who was called to leave his familiar home and journey to a land he had never seen. Abraham's faith compelled him to act on God's instruction, even without knowing all the details. Every step he took was an act of faith, and God honored his trust by fulfilling the promises made to him. In the same way, when God opens a path in our lives, it often requires us to act courageously, take steps forward, and trust him with the results. Even when the next move is uncertain or the outcome is unclear, faith gives us the courage to continue walking. Faith also shapes the way we see obstacles. Without faith, challenges can seem insurmountable, paralyzing us with fear and doubt. With faith, these same challenges become opportunities for God's power to be displayed. When we believe that God is capable of creating a path, we begin to approach difficulties with a mindset of expectation rather than despair. This expectation changes our attitude, our decisions, and our perseverance. Faith transforms our perspective from one focused on limitation to one focused on possibility. We begin to see that every closed door is not a permanent barrier, but a redirection toward a path that God is preparing. Faith teaches patience and resilience, reminding us that even when the road is blocked temporarily, God's timing is perfect and He is working behind the scenes to make a way. Moreover, faith connects us to God's promises. It is the link between the assurance of His word and the reality of our lives. The Bible repeatedly reminds us that without faith, it is impossible to please God. This is not because God desires blind loyalty, but because faith reflects our trust in His character and His plan. When we hold on to faith, we are acknowledging that God is faithful, that He sees the whole journey, and that He can bring the seemingly impossible into reality. Faith allows us to focus on God's power rather than our own limitations. It is an act of surrender, letting go of the need to control every outcome and embracing the certainty that God's wisdom surpasses our understanding. Faith also inspires perseverance. Life's paths are rarely smooth, and the way that God opens often includes moments of testing, delays, and trials. It is during these moments that faith proves its strength. It is easy to trust when everything is going well, but faith is refined when circumstances challenge our confidence. Each time we choose to trust God despite uncertainty, our faith grows stronger and our spiritual muscles are strengthened. These experiences build endurance, preparing us for greater opportunities and more significant steps forward in the path God is opening. Faith is not merely believing in the possibility of a way. It is actively trusting that God will provide the guidance, strength, and resources needed to walk that way successfully. Finally, faith shapes our attitude toward the unseen. The path God opens is often not fully visible at first. There may be twists, turns, and detours that seem confusing or intimidating. Faith allows us to walk forward confidently, knowing that God has already prepared the way. It gives us the assurance that every step we take is guided, every obstacle is accounted for, and every decision is under God's sovereign care. It is the quiet confidence that even when we cannot see the entire road, we are moving in the direction God intends for us. Faith bridges the gap between uncertainty and assurance, between fear and courage, and between inaction and obedience. It empowers us to move forward with hope, courage, and expectation, knowing that God is faithful to fulfill His promises. Faith is not just the first step in walking the path God opens. It is the continuous force that sustains us through every step of the journey. Obedience is the practical expression of faith and the key that unlocks the clear path that God designed. Rest for our lives. While faith provides the inner conviction that God is at work, obedience is the outward action that aligns our lives with His will. Without obedience, faith remains incomplete, like a lamp without light. It has potential, but does not illuminate the path. Obedience requires more than passive agreement or intellectual assent. It demands action that reflects trust in God's wisdom and timing. It involves listening attentively to God's guidance, discerning His instructions through Scripture, prayer, and the counsel of wise mentors, and then taking decisive steps even when the path is uncertain. When we choose obedience, we demonstrate that our trust in God is genuine, and this opens doors that our own understanding cannot create. Obedience begins with listening. God speaks in various ways, sometimes through the still small voice of conviction, sometimes through His word, and sometimes through circumstances that guide us in a particular direction. Recognizing His voice requires attentiveness and a heart willing to respond. Many people fail to experience the fullness of God's path because they either do not listen or they ignore the guidance He provides. Listening, however, is not enough. It must be accompanied by action. When God directs us to take a step, even a small or uncomfortable one, obedience is choosing to act on that direction. Every act of obedience, no matter how minor it may seem, is a declaration of trust in God's sovereignty and his plan for our lives. Obedience also demands courage. The paths God opens are not always the easiest or the most convenient. Sometimes they require leaving behind familiar comforts, taking risks, or stepping into the unknown. Obedience requires faith in action, a willingness to move forward despite fear or uncertainty. Consider the story of Joshua as he prepared to lead the Israelites into the promised land. The task was daunting, filled with enemies, uncertainty, and enormous responsibility. God's instructions were clear. Follow his guidance and he would make the way successful. Joshua's obedience to God's commands brought victory, demonstrating that even when the path seems difficult or risky, obedience positions us to receive God's blessings and guidance. Another aspect of obedience is consistency. God's path is revealed progressively, and walking it successfully often requires repeated acts of compliance with his instructions. Small decisions matter just as much as big ones, because consistent obedience forms the habits and character that allow us to navigate greater challenges. It builds spiritual discipline and sensitivity to God's leading, creating a life that naturally aligns with his will. When we obey consistently, we begin to recognize patterns in God's guidance and experience the satisfaction of walking in step with his plan. Each act of obedience reinforces trust, strengthens character, and deepens our understanding of God's purposes. Obedience is also tied to humility. It requires acknowledging that God's wisdom surpasses our own and that his plans are higher than ours. There are times when our natural inclinations or understanding might suggest a different path, but obedience involves submitting our preferences to God's direction. It is a conscious choice to trust that his way, though sometimes unfamiliar or challenging, is the best path for our lives. Humility allows us to accept correction, adjust our course when necessary, and respond with flexibility to God's instructions. Through obedience, we demonstrate that our relationship with God is rooted in trust rather than convenience or self-interest. Furthermore, obedience opens doors that no human effort can open. When we act in alignment with God's will, we position ourselves to receive his guidance, provision, and favor. The scripture repeatedly emphasizes that those who obey experience God's blessings and direction. Obedience is a conduit for divine intervention. It allows God to orchestrate circumstances, relationships, and opportunities that align with his plan. Often what seems like a closed door or an impossible situation is transformed when we step into obedience, revealing a path that was always available but could only be accessed through compliance with his instructions. Obedience also strengthens our faith and confidence in God. Each act of following his guidance, especially when it defies logic or convenience, reinforces the truth that God is faithful. Over time, a history of obedience creates trust and assurance that God's plans are always good. It builds a life of integrity and alignment with his principles, where his guidance becomes evident and his presence tangible. Obedience is not merely about following rules. It is an active participation in God's plan, a demonstration that our faith is alive, and a vital key that ensures the path he opens remains clear and fruitful. Timing is one of the most critical yet often misunderstood aspects of walking the path that God opens in our lives. Many people become frustrated when things do not happen according to their own schedule, believing that delays or obstacles are signs of failure or neglect. Yet God's timing is always perfect, and understanding this truth is essential for navigating the journey he has prepared. Life is filled with seasons, some of growth, some of waiting, and some of preparation, and each season has a purpose. God's timing ensures that we are equipped, refined, and positioned to step into opportunities at the precise moment when they can yield the greatest fruit. Impatience often leads to missteps or shortcuts, But trusting in God's timing allows us to move forward confidently, knowing that every moment of waiting is purposeful and every delay is part of His plan. Trusting God's timing requires patience, a quality that is cultivated through the repeated practice of faith under uncertain circumstances. Patience is more than simply waiting. It is actively trusting, believing that God is working behind the scenes even when we cannot see the full picture. The process may involve waiting for doors to open, relationships to develop, or resources to become available. But God's timing aligns every element so that when the path is fully revealed, we are ready to walk it successfully. It is during these periods of waiting that character is strengthened, resilience is built, and spiritual depth is cultivated. Each moment of waiting, though it may feel uncomfortable, contributes to our growth and prepares us for the responsibilities and blessings that lie ahead. God's timing is also designed to protect us. There are paths we might pursue prematurely, opportunities that appear promising but are not aligned with His plan. Acting outside of God's timing can result in unnecessary struggles, missed blessings, or unforeseen consequences. When we learn to wait for His timing, we avoid pitfalls and position ourselves for success. This does not mean inaction or passivity. Rather, it means taking intentional steps within the context of trust, prayer, and discernment. Every step we take while waiting should be guided by obedience, preparedness, and alignment with God's principles. The act of waiting becomes an active engagement with faith rather than a passive delay. Another important aspect of God's timing is that it teaches us reliance on Him rather than our own understanding. Human timing is limited. We see only a fraction of what is happening, and we often judge situations based on immediate appearances. God, however, sees the beginning, middle, and end of every circumstance. Trusting His timing is an acknowledgement that His perspective is higher and His plan is perfect. It is a daily decision to surrender our desire for immediate results and to embrace the rhythm of His unfolding purposes. Every delay, every season of waiting becomes an opportunity to deepen our dependence on God, cultivating a mindset that is not driven by impatience or anxiety, but by confidence and trust. Timing also allows for preparation. God's path may include experiences, lessons, and trials that equip us for the journey ahead. Just as an athlete trains before a big game or a student studies before an important exam, the waiting periods in life are opportunities to develop skills, gain insight, and build resilience. These preparatory seasons are essential for long-term success and fulfillment. They ensure that when the path is fully revealed, we possess the wisdom, strength, and discernment to navigate it effectively. Acting too quickly without preparation can lead to failure, disappointment, or missed opportunities, whereas waiting according to God's timing positions us to step confidently and achieve lasting impact. Faith and timing are inseparable. Trusting God's timing strengthens our faith because it requires us to believe in the unseen, to walk confidently without having the entire path mapped out before us. Every instance where we wait faithfully and see God's perfect timing unfold reinforces the truth that He is trustworthy. It cultivates an expectation of divine faithfulness, preparing us to respond with courage, obedience, and gratitude when the path is finally opened. Timing is not a limitation, but a divine alignment that ensures that every step we take contributes to the fulfillment of God's purposes. Finally, God's timing demonstrates His sovereignty and wisdom. There is a rhythm to life that God orchestrates with precision, and every day, every advancement, and every pivot serves His ultimate plan. Recognizing this truth helps us embrace uncertainty with confidence, knowing that no matter how long we wait, God is orchestrating events for our good and His glory. The path He opens will not arrive too early or too late. It will arrive exactly when it is meant to, fully prepared to bring success, growth, and blessings into our lives. Trusting His timing allows us to walk forward in peace, hope, and confidence, knowing that God's hand is in every detail and His timing is perfect in every season. Provision is one of the most remarkable aspects of God opening a path for his people. It is not merely about receiving what we need materially or practically, but about the fullness of resources, wisdom, guidance, and spiritual strength that he supplies along the journey. When God opens a path, he does not leave us to navigate it with our own limited abilities. He provides everything necessary to move forward successfully, ensuring that every step aligns with his purposes. Provision may appear in many forms, sometimes as physical resources, sometimes as strategic opportunities, sometimes as the insight and clarity we need to make wise decisions. Understanding and trusting in God's provision allows us to walk boldly on the path he opens, knowing that we are never alone and never without what is needed. God's provision often begins with wisdom. The ability to make the right decisions is more valuable than material resources because it determines how we utilize the opportunities he provides. Wisdom comes from seeking God's guidance through prayer, scripture, and discernment. It enables us to recognize the doors he opens and the steps he wants us to take. Just as a map provides direction to a traveler, wisdom provides clarity for our journey. When we rely on God's wisdom rather than our own understanding, we avoid missteps, make informed choices, and experience the fullness of his provision in every situation. This kind of provision ensures that we are not merely moving forward, but moving forward in the right direction, aligned with his purposes and plan. Provision also comes through resources that meet our needs. Sometimes God provides in ways that exceed our expectations, turning scarcity into abundance. We may face situations that seem impossible from a human perspective, where the path appears blocked due to lack of funds, influence, or opportunity. Yet God has the power to multiply what little we have, to open doors of opportunity, and to orchestrate circumstances so that his purposes are fulfilled. History is filled with examples of individuals who faced overwhelming obstacles, yet experienced God's provision in miraculous ways. Provision is not always immediate or obvious, but it is always sufficient for the season and purpose God has placed before us. Another form of provision is guidance through divine appointments and connections. God often opens paths through the people he places in our lives. Mentors, partners, friends, and even unexpected acquaintances can become instruments of provision, offering insight, support, or opportunity at the right time. Recognizing and embracing these divine connections requires attentiveness and responsiveness. God's provision is strategic. He does not merely give resources randomly, but he orchestrates circumstances and relationships to position us for success. When we walk in obedience and faith, these appointments become evident, revealing that God's provision is not limited to what we can see, but extends to the unseen elements of his plan. Provision also includes the strength and perseverance needed to continue along the path. Life is not always smooth, and challenges may test our resolve. God's provision encompasses not only external resources, but also internal fortitude. He equips us with courage, endurance, and resilience, ensuring that we can face obstacles without being overwhelmed. Spiritual strength allows us to maintain focus and determination, even in the midst of difficulty, and to continue moving forward with confidence. This kind of provision is often overlooked, yet it is essential for walking the path he opens fully and effectively. Faith plays a crucial role in receiving God's provision. Trusting that he will supply what is needed allows us to move forward without fear or hesitation. Often the path is revealed step by step, and provision is supplied just in time for each stage. This builds dependence on God rather than on our own abilities or timing. It reminds us that he is the source of every blessing and the orchestrator of every opportunity. By walking with faith, we open ourselves to experience his provision in ways that exceed what we could have imagined, reinforcing the truth that he is faithful and that his resources are abundant. Provision also demonstrates God's care and attention to detail. Nothing is overlooked when he opens a path. Every requirement, every challenge, and every decision is accounted for, and he provides precisely what is needed for the season. This teaches us to recognize his hand in all things, cultivating gratitude and trust. When we acknowledge his provision, we not only receive what we need, but also cultivate a deeper relationship with God, appreciating his faithfulness, creativity, and generosity in every aspect of life. Finally, God's provision encourages us to step forward boldly, knowing that we are equipped to succeed. It removes fear and doubt because it reminds us that we are not relying on human strength alone. Every obstacle we encounter can be met with the assurance that God has already provided the tools, wisdom, and support necessary to overcome it. Provision is both practical and spiritual, and it flows from God's faithfulness to those who trust him and follow the path he opens. It is a tangible expression of his love, power, and care, ensuring that as we walk forward, we are fully supported, fully equipped, and fully prepared for the journey ahead. Gratitude is a powerful force that shapes the way we experience the paths God opens in our lives. It is more than a polite response to receiving blessings. It is a deliberate mindset and practice that acknowledges God's hand in every circumstance. Gratitude strengthens our faith because it shifts our focus from what we lack to what God has already provided. It allows us to recognize that every step along the path, whether smooth or challenging, is orchestrated by a loving and faithful God. When we cultivate a heart of gratitude, we are better able to see his guidance, provision, and protection, even in situations that might initially appear difficult or confusing. Gratitude transforms our perspective, enabling us to celebrate the journey rather than just the destination. A heart of gratitude opens our eyes to God's faithfulness. Often people fail to see the evidence of his work because they focus on obstacles or unmet expectations. Gratitude draws our attention to the ways God is already moving in our favor, even when the full path is not yet visible. By acknowledging his past faithfulness, we gain confidence that he will continue to guide us. Remembering victories, breakthroughs, and answered prayers builds a foundation of trust, reinforcing the truth that God is actively opening the path and that he will remain faithful in the seasons to come. Gratitude serves as a spiritual lens, helping us interpret life through the reality of God's power rather than through the limitations of our circumstances. Practicing gratitude also cultivates humility. When we recognize that every opportunity, resource, and step forward comes from God, it diminishes pride and self-reliance. We begin to understand that our success is not solely the result of our own effort, but the outcome of God's guidance and provision. This humility strengthens our willingness to follow his directions and aligns our hearts with his purposes. A grateful heart is teachable, open to correction, and receptive to God's leading. It acknowledges that the journey is not just about reaching goals, but about walking faithfully with him, trusting that each step has significance and meaning. Gratitude enhances perseverance along the path God opens. Challenges and delays are inevitable, but a thankful heart provides perspective and resilience. Instead of becoming discouraged by obstacles, gratitude helps us see them as part of God's plan for growth, refinement, and preparation. By giving thanks for the lessons embedded in trials, we maintain hope and motivation to continue moving forward. This perspective enables us to embrace the journey with joy, knowing that each challenge is an opportunity for spiritual growth and a testament to God's faithfulness. Gratitude transforms difficulty into opportunity, delay into preparation, and uncertainty into confidence. Moreover, gratitude fosters a deeper connection with God. When we express thankfulness, we are engaging in a form of worship that acknowledges his sovereignty and love. Gratitude turns our attention from ourselves to God, strengthening our relationship with him. It cultivates intimacy because it involves recognizing his presence and activity in every part of our lives. As we thank God for the guidance, resources, and opportunities he provides, we develop greater awareness of his constant involvement in our journey. This awareness enhances our trust, strengthens our faith, and encourages obedience, creating a cycle where gratitude fuels deeper reliance on him. Gratitude also impacts how we interact with others along the path God opens. When we are thankful, our perspective becomes generous and compassionate. We recognize that God's provision is not limited to us alone, but can flow through us to bless others. A grateful heart fosters encouragement, patience, and empathy, allowing us to support and uplift those we encounter. Gratitude creates a ripple effect. As we acknowledge God's blessings in our lives, we inspire others to see His goodness and trust in His guidance as well. This communal aspect of gratitude amplifies its power, extending God's influence beyond our personal journey. Furthermore, gratitude reinforces trust in God's timing and provision. Even when the full path is not clear or the results of our efforts are not immediate, a thankful heart believes that God is orchestrating every detail. Gratitude reminds us that He has already provided exactly what is needed for the present season and will continue to supply everything required for the next steps. By recognizing His hand in both successes and setbacks, we maintain confidence in His plan and experience peace in the midst of uncertainty. Ultimately, gratitude is an essential companion on the journey God opens. It transforms our mindset, strengthens our faith, and enhances our perception of His work. By consistently acknowledging His presence, provision, and faithfulness, we experience the path with clarity, joy, and confidence. Gratitude ensures that we walk forward not in doubt or fear, but in trust and expectation, fully aware that God is leading, providing, and guiding every step of the way. Hope is the sustaining force that keeps us moving forward on the path God opens, even when the way seems uncertain or obstacles appear overwhelming. It is not mere wish, alt-thinking, or blind optimism, but a confident expectation grounded in the character and promises of God. Hope enables us to anticipate God's faithfulness and provision, even when circumstances seem contrary or the future is unclear. Life is filled with challenges, setbacks, and unexpected detours. And without hope, these difficulties can easily lead to despair or inaction. But when hope is anchored in God, it provides the endurance, courage, and perseverance necessary to continue walking the path He has prepared. Hope sees beyond present difficulties, focusing instead on the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan, and it gives the inner strength to press on despite uncertainty. Hope is deeply connected to faith. Faith is the belief in God's promises, and hope is the expectation that those promises will come to fruition. When we combine faith and hope, we gain both the confidence to trust in God and the motivation to keep moving forward. Hope is what allows us to lift our eyes above immediate circumstances and recognize that God's plan is greater than any challenge we face. It encourages patience, reminding us that every delay or trial has a purpose and that God's timing is perfect. Hope transforms our perspective, allowing us to focus not on limitations, but on possibilities. Not on fear, but on God's power to make a way. Hope also strengthens perseverance. Walking the path God opens is rarely easy, and it often requires enduring hardships, wading through delays, and navigating challenges. Without hope, it is easy to give up, become discouraged, or take matters into our own hands prematurely. Hope provides the inner fuel to press on, to remain steadfast, and to continue trusting in God's guidance. It reminds us that every step, no matter how small, is significant when it is taken in alignment with His plan. When hope is present, challenges become temporary obstacles rather than insurmountable barriers, and setbacks become opportunities for growth, refinement, and deeper dependence on God. Another aspect of hope is that it fosters resilience. Life often presents unexpected trials, disappointments, and failures. And without hope, these experiences can leave us feeling defeated or hopeless. Hope allows us to recover from setbacks and maintain confidence that God is still at work. It provides emotional and spiritual stability, reminding us that the ultimate outcome is secure in God's hands. By maintaining hope, we develop the strength to face challenges with courage, the patience to endure trials, and the determination to continue pursuing the path God has opened. Hope is not passive. It is an active force that empowers us to persevere, adapt, and trust despite difficulties. Hope also directs our focus toward God's promises rather than our present circumstances. Human vision is limited, and it is easy to become discouraged when we only see the obstacles ahead. Hope shifts our perspective to God's ability, power, and faithfulness. It encourages us to see that what may appear impossible from a human standpoint is possible with God. This perspective fosters confidence, courage, and boldness, allowing us to take steps forward even when the way seems unclear. Hope reminds us that God's hand is guiding the path, and His plan is unfolding according to His perfect wisdom. Furthermore, hope motivates action. While it provides endurance and perspective, hope also inspires us to step forward and engage with the path God opens. It compels us to pursue opportunities, seek God's guidance actively, and participate in the journey He has laid out. Hope transforms expectation into action, giving us the courage to make decisions, take steps, and move forward with confidence. When hope is alive, we are not passive observers waiting for circumstances to change. We become active participants in God's plan, trusting that He will provide the resources, wisdom, and guidance necessary for each step. Hope also nurtures gratitude and joy. By focusing on God's faithfulness and the ultimate fulfillment of His promises, hope encourages us to celebrate small victories and recognize His hand in every moment. It allows us to maintain a positive perspective even in difficult times and to experience peace knowing that God is orchestrating the journey. Hope reminds us that the obstacles we encounter are temporary, that God's provision is sufficient, and that the path He opens leads to fulfillment, blessing, and spiritual growth. Finally, hope is contagious. When we walk in hope, our confidence and trust in God inspire those around us. It encourages others to trust God's guidance, remain patient, and persevere in their own journeys. Hope becomes a beacon that points to God's faithfulness, reminding everyone who observes our walk that God is able to open paths, provide resources, and lead His people to victory. Hope sustains, strengthens, and directs us, allowing us to navigate life's challenges with confidence, courage, and expectation. Faithfulness is the cornerstone of experiencing the full impact of the path God opens in our lives. It is more than simply showing up or fulfilling obligations. Faithfulness is a steadfast commitment to trust, obey, and remain loyal to God throughout every season. Life is full of unpredictable circumstances, shifting opportunities and challenges that test our resolve. Yet faithfulness is what sustains us through uncertainty and ensures that we remain aligned with God's purposes. When we are faithful, we demonstrate that our relationship with God is not dependent on convenience, visible success, or immediate results. Instead, it is rooted in a deep conviction that God is sovereign, His plans are perfect, and His promises are reliable. Faithfulness allows us to navigate the path He opens with integrity, endurance, and unwavering trust, even when the outcome is not immediately apparent. Faithfulness begins with consistency in our actions and choices. God notices the small daily acts of loyalty, obedience, and diligence just as much as the monumental decisions or achievements. Just as a farmer must consistently tend the soil before harvest, we must consistently walk in alignment with God's word, principles, and guidance to fully experience the paths He opens. Small acts of faithfulness build spiritual strength, character, and reliability, laying the foundation for greater opportunities and blessings. Over time, these consistent actions demonstrate our commitment to God's plan and create an environment where His favor and guidance flow more freely. Faithfulness is rarely flashy, but it produces lasting impact because it reflects a heart committed to God rather than temporary results. Faithfulness also requires perseverance. The journey God opens is rarely straightforward, and setbacks, delays, or obstacles are inevitable. Remaining faithful during challenging times distinguishes those who experience the fullness of God's plan from those who give up or compromise. Perseverance is an active choice to trust God even when the path is difficult, to remain obedient even when progress is slow, and to continue serving Him even when recognition or reward is delayed. The testing of faith through trials is not punishment, but preparation, refining our character and deepening our reliance on God. Faithfulness under pressure strengthens endurance, cultivates resilience, and positions us to fully embrace the blessings and opportunities God has prepared. Faithfulness is deeply connected to integrity. When we are faithful, our actions reflect our values and commitment, regardless of whether anyone is watching. God honors integrity and measures our loyalty not by external appearances, but by the consistency of our hearts and actions. Faithfulness builds credibility both spiritually and relationally, allowing us to be trusted with greater responsibility and divine opportunities. It aligns our character with God's principles, ensuring that the paths He opens are navigated with wisdom, discernment, and honor. A faithful life attracts favor, multiplies opportunities, and demonstrates to others the reality of God's guidance and provision. Faithfulness also strengthens our relationship with God. Every act of loyalty, obedience, and trust reinforces the connection between our hearts and His. When we remain faithful, we experience God's presence, guidance, and provision more tangibly because we are living in alignment with His will. Faithfulness fosters intimacy, cultivating a deeper awareness of His voice and a greater sensitivity to His direction. It is through faithful living that we grow spiritually, develop discernment, and experience the transformative power of walking the path God opens. Another critical aspect of faithfulness is trust in God's promises. Remaining faithful does not mean that life will always be easy or that results will be immediate. Often, faithfulness requires waiting, enduring, and continuing to act according to God's principles despite uncertainty. Trusting that He will fulfill His promises, even when circumstances appear contrary, strengthens our resolve and anchors our hope. This trust enables us to step boldly into new opportunities, make difficult decisions, and maintain a steadfast commitment to God's plan. Faithfulness is both an expression of trust and a demonstration of dependence on His sovereignty. Faithfulness is also a testimony to others. When people see a life committed to God despite challenges, delays, or difficulties, they witness the reality of God's faithfulness and the power of a steadfast heart. Our faithfulness encourages, inspires, and points others toward God, creating a ripple effect that extends beyond our own lives. It demonstrates that true success is not measured merely by achievement or recognition, but by consistent loyalty, obedience, and trust in God. Finally, faithfulness opens the way for God's blessings and guidance to flow fully. It is through faithfulness that He entrusts us with greater responsibilities, clearer paths, and more significant opportunities. Faithfulness aligns our hearts, minds, and actions with His purposes, ensuring that every step we take along the path He opens is guided, empowered, and fruitful. It is the consistent demonstration of loyalty, trust, and perseverance that transforms a journey of uncertainty into a journey of divine fulfillment, impact, and testimony.